Okay, I welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video show where we interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest in our show. Today's guest, Karthik Balu, is someone whose work I've really enjoyed. I found his work on Substack and I've been a fan ever since. A little bit about Karthik before we jump into this conversation. Karthik has been writing poems, essays, and stories since he was in primary school growing up in Bengaluru. As a teenager, the allure of living the good life got him to pursue engineering and then management. He worked at Warner Bros. India in marketing and distribution of films for nearly 10 years before quitting the job and leaving Mumbai city. He returned to Bengaluru and enrolled into Azim Premji University for an MA in education. For 2 years, he engaged with questions on equity, children's well-being, and the role of literature in classrooms. On graduating, he joined the Gubbachi Learning Community, a Bangalore-based NGO that is working towards providing quality education to out-of-school children. Karthik writes on society, culture, and mental health through social commentaries, personal essays, memoirs, short poems, and stories. And his Substack is called Reading This World, which I will also be linking in the show notes. So, Karthik, thank you so much for making time for this interview. And I know we spoke a couple of days ago just to prepare for this, but I've really enjoyed your writing, and it's something that I've always wondered. The life of a writer. Where does the seed of that ability really set in? So, the first question I wanted to ask you, Karthik, is if you could tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up in Bengaluru. Um, what was that like? Or what school did you go to, and what were some of the other influences in your life with regards to your parents, your other hobbies and such?
So I grew up at my parents' house for the sake of better schooling. So I was here. Since primary school, I've been here. I grew up here, and growing up, my childhood was always a little different. You know, from those of my peers, my classmates, and my friends, because of this aspect, and which also made it more interesting. For example, and I was just thinking about it that I started off for reading comic books like all children because of the illustrations, or even before comic books, there were books that had a lot of illustrations, right? Or when you start off as a reader uh, in primary school, and then children usually graduate to what we call chapter books.
Hmm.
These are the enabler. You have the book is you have an entire book which is divided into chapters, and you go chapter by chapter, finish the book. So these are usually adventures, children going on adventure, solving some mysteries, some crime, stuff like that. So I also was keen to graduate from books with illustrations to these kind of books. But then I did not enjoy them so much, you know, uh, because my friends were reading these books and my cousins were reading these books. Even I would borrow these books from the school library, bring them home, try reading up to a point, but never really, hardly ever finishing the book. Because I now, reflecting on it now, I now feel that, my own childhood was so much more interesting. There were so many fascinating things, real life adventures that I was doing. That these books were, yeah, quite good, but not really as good as, as rich as my own life. But the other books that I enjoyed were what we call Moby books. So these are abridged classics. So I didn't know them. I didn't know they were abridged classics. I thought these were the real books. And those books were shorter books. They had some illustrations on one side, on one side, and text on the other side, the larger font. So you had, all the science fiction, War of the Worlds, and you had Frankenstein, Gulliver's Travels. So all the classics were available, and my aunt's house, had all of these books. So I devoured those books. I enjoyed those books, which were not really children's books, but yeah, they were made for children to get, so that we can get into reading bigger books later on. So I enjoyed those books also because I feel they had adult themes, which I somehow could relate to. You know, talk about say belonging, loyalty, themes like friendship, love, and hate. You know, I really I enjoyed those books a lot because they were dealing with these. The same with films also. Films that had these themes. Films not made for children, but for a larger audience, but dealing with adult themes. So I could. Those were the books and the films that moved me and that really fascinated me. That I would think about uh, late at night. Those things. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Because as you were speaking, I was also thinking about how sometimes the books you read also, how they change over time. Was it only English, or would you read in Kannada and other languages, or like Tulu or something else?
No, no. It was only English. So yeah, I was studying in an English medium school, and I spoke to my mother about it a few years back when I was studying in APU. We had an assignment, so we had to write a literary autobiography. So this was how we started reading and what are the kind of books we read, and up to this age, how we grew up with books. So that was the assignment. So at that time, I asked my mother, "So what did you read to me at first?" She told me it was ABCD, English alphabet. So I asked her, "Why not Kannada?" She said, "Well, there was a lot of pressure to, teach children English. So that was very important. So we started off in English, and yeah, in an English medium school, you're also the environment is so much about." Not just reading and writing, also speaking English well. There is a lot of emphasis on that. Teachers like uh, kids who speak well, who write and read and write English well. So, so yeah, I hardly my elder cousin, he still reads Kannada books. He lives in the US, but he still reads Kannada books. But somehow he's 6 years elder to me. But we guys, me and his younger sibling, we all grew up reading mostly English.
Yeah. Like because you're partly, and you did your MA in education, and you've been working in education for some time, and I read that beautiful essay that you wrote, hence education, and I'm just curious, Karthik, when you look back at your own journey in a school, what are some things you are able to notice now that you have been immersed in the system yourself, and what were some of the the good things or the bad things. I know it's hard to have like a black and white sort of spectrum, but just things you think you observe and reflect about now.
The biggest difficulty for me, even back then, was rote learning.
Mm.
How we had to memorize everything and go and just let it out on the exam paper, and that is all that mattered. Right? Back then, that is all that mattered because 100% of your exam scores, the entire year's scores, were dependent on that one exam. Those 2 to 3 hours when you have to sit and write everything that you memorized in the past few days. So that was, I didn't enjoy rote learning. I didn't enjoy memorizing tables. And, that still gives me goosebumps. Like, oh, that was so difficult without understanding what we are doing. When you're memorizing tables. So that was a challenge. Exams were stressful. So some of these things have been resolved now. The assessments, the way of assessing children have changed. There is mm, not so much emphasis on just one exam. Your whole learning is at every stage of learning. Your assessed and your mark, which includes internal assessment and the test. So those things have changed. Mm, Reflecting on my own schooling, there was also this how there was so much like how do we choose our careers? That was a big question back then. Like right from 10th grade onwards, uh, parents and elders start asking you, okay, what do you want to do? What do you become? And the role modeling, for that is also provided by parents and elders, teachers. Right? So they are the ones who are saying which is the kind of career that is a good career. They're not telling you have to study medicine or engineering, but then there is a way in which they are showing you what's the good career. So me and all my peers invariably went into either medicine or engineering. Very few of them even went into something like a law or becoming entrepreneur, studying commerce. Very, very few. Most of us went in these directions, whether we had the aptitude for it or not.
Mm.
So I think that is something that bothered me even at Warner Brothers. Uh, because somewhere I asked myself this question like, why am I doing this? Why do I really, did I really want to do this all the while? Doing marketing and sales. Did I want to do this all the while, or did was it something that I was, you know, nudged in certain directions, which led me to engineering and then led me to management, and then I ended up having that career. So that's a question I started asking, thinking somewhere around 2012, 13, 14, asking these questions that how did I end up here, and that those questions led me to Azim Premji. Okay, I wanted to figure out. So there is something that happened, which I was not entirely comfortable with, which I was not uh, enjoying so much. So why did I end up in this career? Why not, study literature, which has been my first love throughout my schooling? How did I not choose this? How did I? Um, why was I not empowered to make such a decision? Right? Because back then it was a radical decision. literature was a radical decision in that setting. Of course, there were kids who were choosing that, but in that setting, it was because, as I told you, most children were choosing sciences, either medicine or. So yeah, that is something that was there. Those questions were there, and I wanted to explore those, and that is something also I wanted to change in some way. If I can make this change and ensure that children are empowered to make certain decisions and to make choices of their own. And yeah, how do we? Because here, see, it is not just one is one side is empowering of the children, the other side is counseling parents, you know, preparing them for for the child to take certain decisions. So it is something that I wish to do, and that's how, these questions are what led me to Azim Premji.
Such an interesting journey, Karthik, because I think every profession, has its merits and it has its, struggles. And I think even when I was in high school in the late 2000s, I think I was also in the same environment where the larger conversation, because I was just thinking about what you said and I went back to how things did not change much for, a good 10, 15 years. And I think if you were coming from a certain background, the expectation was almost to, move into that professional path. And I feel like subconsciously somewhere, I also knew that the sciences were on the top, and then it was commerce, and then it was, the arts at the bottom. So, and you could see within the way students interacted with each other that they had also sort of absorbed that hierarchy, in the way they would talk to each other.
Mm.
And yeah, and like I'm also, thinking about uh, the idea of a career and how, we always look at it in such a linear way, right, Karthik? So in like looking back on your journey, like right now, because I know the personal essay or the memoir is something that you are really connected to as a writer. So if you were writing the letter to a younger version of Karthik, in that phase, um, what were some things maybe you would, tell that Karthik at that point? And I'm not even thinking about this in terms of necessarily changing what he did or what he pursued, but just to keep that hope and glimmer, alive in that person at that point.
Oh, interesting question. So, firstly, it is to mm, spend time with yourself to know, to understand yourself better. I think self awareness is key here. There are schools which work on this a lot, like the Krishnamurti school that work on self awareness. Because if we don't know what is it that that is within us, what moves us, what are we repelled by, and what do we run towards. So if we don't know this, we can get swayed in any direction. Just as I told you, the idea of a good life can sway you in that direction because everyone's saying you get through engineering and you can move into the US and live the American life. So if if the child has enough self-awareness, then to know what is it that what is it that the child enjoy doing, what is the kind of uh, activities that fulfills, child. So that everything, I think self-awareness is key to know that much about yourself. Uh, and then you also have to learn, I think, to communicate, with your parents, with your teachers. If I had communicated better, then I could have even uh, convinced them to support. Right? If I had the awareness, firstly, to know that this is what I really enjoy doing, what I wish to pursue, and then you have to have someone on your side. It won't be, there would be teachers, there would be uncles and aunts, there would be the elder sibling, parents. So you need to convince one or two people, get them on your side, and then, through that, and finally influence parents or whoever is a decision maker to support you. So I think, yeah, these two I would tell my investors. If you can crack this much, you can move ahead.
Great. I think that shows that connective thread between who you were then and who you are now, right? It's still the same person in both these environments as well. And when you were pursuing your course at Azim Premji University, and it's one of the premier education institutions in the country, and they have these wonderful graduate programs. So, like in terms of some of the things you mentioned here, Karthik, the role of literature in the classrooms, engaging with questions on equity, children's well-being. So, what were some things you learned in that 2-year period that maybe changed or challenged your thinking about some of these things?
In the first year, we had courses on the philosophy of education, history of education, and these two courses uh, were about to understand where uh, education comes from, how our schooling system has developed all through history, and we are here. So understanding that, I think, is important to know. You can't make radical changes overnight. So there is a reason why you're why we have a curriculum, you know, and why we have certain schooling systems. And that understanding that was useful. And what really the eye openers for me were about what all literature can do. I think that in the second year is when I chose to specialize, you know, focus on one stream, which is the literature, language and literature. So there is so much potential in uh, using literature and stories, library activities. How we can um, shape, children's thinking, and how we can get them to, ask critical questions, think critically, and ask these questions, and be curious about the world. So they say that literature is both a window and a mirror. On
Mm.
the one hand, it is opening you to the world outside, getting to know more things. The more you read, the more you understand about the world around you, and it's also a mirror to know what is within you. And what what is like every story moves you in why. So that is something a library activity can also get a child to reflect upon each story. So for me, yeah, I think that was very enriching to study more about language and literature. And also, I did my research paper on teaching English in small towns in India. Right? So, because what I could see during my field visits during those 2 years was that one that in the cities like Bangalore and Mumbai, you have an environment of English around you. So a child, it's very easy for a child to pick up the language. You know, one is you have books and or newspapers, libraries. So you have all of this in your immediate environment, but even otherwise, you have movies on TV. You have mm, so much else advertising, that is happening. So there is an environment of English, but small towns lack that. So it is even more challenging when even in an English class, the teacher is not actually speaking in English. Teacher would be speaking in any of the local languages and teaching English, right? Because the conversations are happening in, say, Kannada. You're teaching English, that is the subject that we. That is also there is nothing wrong in that. I'm just saying that there is a lack of that environment which the child is not surrounded by. So that's an added challenge for a child to learn in small towns to learn English. So that is something that I studied on, and I researched in a small town in Karnataka, and then found out how we can uh, help children learn better English, because mainly because the English is a language of mobility. Right? Your jobs are dependent, careers are dependent on English. Your higher education is in English. So once you reach there, even if you haven't, if you have the disadvantage of growing up in a small town, you end up in a university for your graduation, post graduation, and suddenly everything is in English. The lectures are in English, the books you have to read, the papers you have to read, exams you have to write are all in English. So it is all of a sudden, the challenge is so much higher. So which is why, you know, uh, that we need to have a different kind of mindset for educators to teach English in small towns, in these contexts where they don't have English, that much English in their environment. So yeah, that is what I studied.
I think it's such a complex challenge as well, right? I think building on what you said is that the linguistic diversity in our country is so large
Mhm.
that there is the benefit of people speaking multiple languages, but also holding on and grasping new languages at the same time. Like for instance, I also do speak Tulu. I think in English, but I can speak Tulu and speak Hindi. So but I don't think I can read as well in Hindi or speak as well in Tulu. So being so focused on English from a young age has not let me develop in those areas. Or maybe it's just a personal experience. I feel like it's very subjective to what context you are learning in, what are the priorities of the adults in that environment. But very interesting, Karthik. I'd love to read your research maybe later on about your findings as well, Karthik.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
happy to share it.
yeah, and, Karthik, I've read your film reviews, and I love how you observe and talk about things that you see in these films. You know, I know you worked in, the marketing of films, for an extended period of time, but in our last conversation, you mentioned that when you talk about, a film, it's often coming from a point of finding something that stayed with you and then going from there. So if you could maybe, tell me, Karthik, like uh, 3 or 4 films that have stayed with you for a very long time, and you can go back to and get something new each time, or like just to talk about um, 3 or 4 films that really had an impact on you over time.
Okay, there are so many films, and it always happens. Uh, the way it works is that, like, say for example, yeah, I watched Titanic for the first time when it came out in 1997. Uh, I was first year of engineering, so it was that kind of a movie where we had a rundown movie hall nearby, single screen theater, which kept playing it for months. And if after dinner time, we were bored, we would just say, "Let's go watch Titanic." It would be there would always be tickets available after maybe the first couple of months. Tickets were available, and we would just go in and watch Titanic. And so I'm giving the example of Titanic because so at the age of 17, there is only that much I could understand about Titanic. One is that there was a poor boy meets a rich girl on a ship. And, things happen there between them. Ship gets uh, wrecked, and yeah. So this is what I understood at the age of 17. Then thankfully the movie was re-released. I think by then I was uh, 30 or so. Uh, and I went and watched the movie again. But there I could now see that, oh, there is the whole the class system at play here. Right? It's not just the rich girl and the poor boy. The rich girl is also trapped in her own life, right? Because now that's gender at play. And then there is how they all make him feel because he's from a certain background, right? Because he does not belong there. Everyone apart from that one lady, everyone uh, shows him, in subtle and not so subtle and even direct ways that you don't belong here. You have made it here through your uh, cunning ways, but you just don't belong here. So everyone makes it. So I could feel that when I was only when I was 30 years old, I could actually feel, oh, this is brutal what they're doing to this boy. And then yeah, and then I could see how there was the ego of that one or two people who wanted to set a record. You know, super rich, powerful men who simply wanted a record for themselves and put so many lives at risk just for the sake of that. And and uh, the number of times they show, you know, the working class right at the bottom. There are levels to the ship, and there are the super rich and the middle rung, the poor people, and finally, right at the bottom of everything are people working, you know, uh, who are filling in coal to run the ship and rowing and doing all of that hard manual labor. And eventually, what happens is that the ship hits the iceberg, and once again, you know. who gets rescued first, who gets the lifeboat, who gets the life jacket, who does not. So all of that is shown so well, which I could not see at 17, or I could not. It did not have that much of an impact, you know, at 17, but at 31 or so, when I watched it for the second time, that's when I could see all of this. And so this is what happens, I feel, with films, is that as you grow and as you uh, become more worldly aware, read more, seen more life, and you are able to see more of what the filmmaker is showing. How many layers do they have to this story? What are the other themes which are present but which you could not see before? See them. So yeah, Titanic is a great film. Similarly, Avatar is also a great film which also explores so many themes of the oppressor and the oppressed. Mm,
Point you said, Karthik, about how at a different point in your life, the same film can have a very different impression on you. And when you were speaking, I was thinking that you can learn so much about history, politics, economics, through a film, uh, through the characters' narrative arc. Dil Chahta Hai was one film that was also very pivotal for me. I was a lot younger at that point, but um, like I'm curious about your perspective because that film was considered like a turning point in terms of the aesthetic and visual sort of narratives that were told. I think it also focused a little bit more on the urban metro sort of story. But like, how has your impression of that film changed over time?
yeah, Dil Chahta Hai also was similarly. I watched it first when it was 2000 or 2001. Yeah, 2001. We were finishing college. So 97 was starting of college, 2001 finishing of college. I think that was the last film we all, college friends went and watched together. So it was the turning point. Right? There was so much that movie changed in terms of how even characters speak to each other. Everything, they did have that thumping background score before the hero is about to, say something dramatic. Akshay Khanna's character Sid, he just slaps Amir Khan's character Akash, and there is no background music to add any punch to it. The slap is just how a slap feels and sounds, right? A soft thump, and that's it. Slap. And but the impact is shown on the face of Amir Khan. So yeah. Dil Chahta Hai, again, I revisited it during the pandemic in 2021, and that's when I could see so much more of Dil Chahta Hai because I had done some reading on child psychology, which we had studied in Azim Premji University. But we had not studied this part of attachment theory, which I read on my own because by then I had become fascinated with child psychology. It was very interesting to know, why my brain is working like this and my friend's brain is working different because our childhood experiences and early childhood experiences or school experiences, somewhere our personalities got shaped so early in life and we continued like that. So attachment theory is something, sure, the filmmakers, among the writers, the team of writers who wrote the film, someone you know must have studied child psychology. They were very, very precise, and they did it in a nuanced way. There were no uh, major scenes to show that that Akash is like this because of his parents. There were no connections that were directly shown. No one talks about it, and there are no songs to indicate that this is an inherited behavior. But then, in just those few scenes, you get to know that okay, there is a way, the kind of relationship Akash has with his parents, kind of relationship Sid has with his mother, and a different, entirely different kind of relationship which Samir has with his parents. So each set of parents have hardly 2 or 3 scenes, nothing more. But then in that much time, those scenes are so well written and performed that they are able to tell you why, what kind of relationship they have, the parents and children, and then the entire characters' behavior and their uh, attachments to their friends and their girlfriend or lovers. So all of that is, there is a thread connecting, and that is what attachment theory says. That you learned it in early childhood, you picked it up from your parent, as in the relationship you had with your parents, the way your parents responded to you. You picked it up, and somewhere you want to replicate it because that is what is comforting for you. That's familiar, that's comforting, even whether it's not a good thing. You know, even being like Akash is a detached character, it's not a good thing, for him in a relationship or a friendship. But then it's just what is familiar to him. That's just the way he knows. So yeah, that is. There are so many things about Dil Chahta Hai, right from costumes to music. Apparently, the first time the film distributors, saw the first trailer of Dil Chahta Hai and listened to the songs which played in the trailer, they said these are like ad jingles. These are not film songs. And they never heard these kind of film songs before. But then, they were. This was a trend-setting film. All the other films which followed, followed this path later on in terms of uh, how real, close to life these uh, interactions are with friends, and the kind of songs they had, the costumes, the whole their rooms, their homes, the way they were designed, their hair, makeup, all. This movie was, yeah, it changed. It changed the film industry, and it also changed the audience because multiplexes came later on. Okay? This was 2001, so I think the first multiplex opened in India. And then gradually, by 2006 or 7, you had something called the multiplex film, which was a small budget film, made for multiplex audience, very urban, maybe English, some English and some Hindi. And it could be quirky, it could go offbeat. So, the filmmakers could take these chances. So you have movies like Jankar Beats and Beja Fry, which all went on to become hits. But they were specifically for the multiplex audience. And all of them, all of these risk taking starts with uh, Dil Chahta Hai, and here big stars like Amir Khan, took that risk.
See that shift even in more recent times with so much like a lot of good writing also moving to OTT, and not just in an Indian context but globally. You see some great television coming up, and Karthik's written some wonderful essays on shows like White Lotus and The Bear, which I think are wonderfully written, like very rich characters that really bring out so much in you as a viewer as well when you see some of these things. Karthik, I just wanted to also explore your journey as a writer, which I know is a very core part of your identity. I know storytelling is something you love as a reader, as a film watcher. Just as I mean, talking to you, I realized that you are naturally like a storyteller, in terms of how you share experiences. Um, but what is the story of Karthik as a writer? Like where, because I wanted to talk to you about the two learning experiences you were in, the Ochre Sky writing workshop and the Amit Verma writing group. So can you tell me about how you found or rediscovered or re-engaged with Karthik as the writer in the recent years?
So it was during the pandemic is when um, the second wave was upon us. It was April, March, April, and around that time is when uh, I knew, there was a previous lockdown. I had the experience of the previous lockdown when things did not go so well. So since this lockdown was coming up, and I was also living by myself at that time, I wanted to have certain healthy habits, you know, to take better care of myself. So I started to, run. Is That is one early morning habit I started. And the second one I started was to write one haiku every day. So this is I, uh, I'd read haikus and somewhere I had played around with them on doing this. But then on 1st of April, I made an announcement in my one group of friends on the WhatsApp group that I'm going to send you all one haiku every day. And that's a commitment I made. And that's how I started writing haikus. Now, the advantage of haikus, which I realized later on, is that there is already a set template, right, in which you have to write. There is, these many syllables to fit in each line, and in 3 lines, you tell everything that you want to tell in a haiku, and you can't go on for longer, right? So that way, there is a finite uh, box within which I have to fit in my words. And the second thing that helped me was that it was mm, not very challenging. It was not. It could not, uh, go on for longer, and it was also a way of expressing. So there was a lot that was happening during that month, and all of us were going through a lot. And here I could share what I was going through with my friends, and I could be creative. You know, I could find more clever ways or more, you know, effective ways to, share what I was going through. And I was getting, appreciated for it. Sometimes I would get a heart sign, or I would get a few words of appreciation, which was fantastic. Right? You are accomplishing something and you are getting rewarded for it. And finally, I think what really touched me was that sometimes someone would say, "Thank you for this." That really, I think, that made me feel okay. There is some power to these words that I am writing, that that is happening. But I'm able to write these words, and which are affecting people, in such a way that they're actually thanking me for it. So I think that was really that was an experience that made me feel that there is you know that this is something I would wish to continue in some way. I wanted to mm, later on, after haikus, I wanted to do something longer, write a 50-word story, all of that, which did not work. But then I, I had discovered something in that 1 month, and this is what I wanted to explore further. When I eventually um ended up joining a writing workshop, first with Amit Verma, and then later on through Amit Verma interviewed Natasha Badwar, who is the founder of the Sky Writing Club. So, during that podcast is when I discovered her. Although I was reading her, but then this was a really deep and moving conversation that they had. I listened to it twice, and then I said, okay, this is someone uh, she had a writing workshop. I knew about it. Then, okay, the next time this appears, I should sign up. So I started looking up on Google and finding out more information, trying to find out more information. In between all this, on Amit Verma's, WhatsApp group, someone posted, yeah, there is a more writing workshop coming up. Yeah, I signed up for it, and since then I've been writing with August. It's been almost 2 years.
In terms of like the community aspect of writing, Karthik, how is it? How would you say it's different from doing it individually? If you were individually exploring some of these resources, would that have been very different from doing it in like this community setup?
Yeah, I had always imagined writing to be like a writer to be someone who is inside a closed room, you know, and spilling his guts out and bleeding on paper. That is how I always imagined a writer to be, and I'd even attempted this. I had locked myself up and tried to write. I had traveled far off place, again locked myself up and said, okay, now I have to write. But it did not happen back.
Mm,
And so that is where both with Amit Verma's and later on with Natasha's was that there is a way of writing together.
mm,
That is something have discovered at Augusta is how a community of writers. Mm, Firstly, you write maybe your first essay, and then you read out on camera, and you have a group of writers who are listening to you. And then again, you go from writer to writer. Everyone reads out, and each reading, each such recitation is emboldening the next writer, making you feel that, oh yeah, if you know, if Sanober can do it, so can I. So that's how it's you write together. That is on camera, right? During a workshop, but then even beyond that, even after you end up you write your essay and you submit your essay, and then we have an app called Slack. So now each time I post my writing, then there are the rest of them who are reading, who respond to it right there, who share comments, they share their feedback, and all of this helps. This is the feedback loop
mm,
that helps you want more of it. Right? If you are if you're feeling good about the feedback that you're getting, and you want more such feedback, you want to write again next week and the following week. And I think yeah, that is something I discovered only now, that oh yeah, you can write together, you can grow together. So if you see on Substack now, every few weeks there is a new cohort that joins in, and the community grows larger and larger. So it's been, yeah, that kind of a community experience of writing together, and also of helping each other, nudging each other, guiding each other. Some are writing books, some are part of anthologies. So everything. It's a way of playing and growing together, yeah, and learning in between. Yeah, that.
Yeah, that playing and growing together is such a nice way to summarize that experience. And even with Substack, Karthik, there were other mediums. There was blogging, there was Medium, there's Twitter, there are shorter forms of social media posts. But as a writer, for you, why do you think Substack is working for you in terms of a platform that you enjoy writing on?
Substack also has the whole social aspect, wherein you share not just your writing, but you also share someone else's writing on your timeline, and which goes to your subscribers and your followers, who end up discovering new writers.
Mm,
You also get discovered like that because someone else has shared your writing. So I think that's a great way to find other writers and also to be found. Right? That is one thing that Substack has. And the other thing that I found out is how, like, if at all, another writer has recommended me, then when a new subscriber and subscribes, say, Namit's newsletter, and sees that Namit is recommending Karthik, and they end up subscribing because they're new to Substack, they want to discover writers, and they subscribe to my newsletter as well. And then that communication is given to me. Right? Substack tells me that this person has subscribed to you, he found you through Namit's newsletter. So which is so fantastic, because as Namit's readership grows, so does mine.
mm,
Or there are chances of my readership growing as well. Similarly, everyone grows together. So that is, I think, a very good way, wherein it's not that you know people might be feeling competitive as well, but then the more competitive they are, and the more they go out, on other platforms, you know, and promote their writing, or get published in other journals or magazines, newspapers, and they find more subscribers, and you know, the newsletters they're recommending also find.
mm.
So in a way, everyone is growing together. I like this aspect as well.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's such an encouraging community, in terms of also putting, giving importance to the long form sort of piece rather than, um, a shorter sort of communication. And also in terms of how it's changed digital communication. I wouldn't say changed completely, but the idea of an archive, to not only engage with another person on the internet based on their most recent posts, but also considering how they've communicated over time. I feel like that is a very powerful way to communicate with someone, because you're getting to see how their thinking has evolved over time, and even the recommendations part, I feel like it's a way of celebrating, other writers. But as you were saying earlier, I think writing can be sometimes a little solitary, in terms of the act of putting those words on paper or screen. But to see other people read passages, share certain passages, leave a comment, I can imagine that can really be very gratifying as a writer, recording your thoughts. So yeah, that's very well put, Karthik. In terms of for the last question, Karthik, I just wanted to ask you because I'm someone that loves Substack, and there may be other listeners here that are also new to the platform. If you could, tell me about some writers that whose writing you've enjoyed and what is unique about what they write about. And I know the people can go back to your Substack and see all the ones you read as well. But just like a shout out to other writers to end, the podcast.
Mm, there are so many of them. Uh, Tough to pick, you know, one or two. Mm, if you are interested in sports, there is Sarthak who writes Line Commentaries. Uh, it's it is something that I look forward to.
Yeah.
Uh, Being a follower of sports, and I have been reading. Um, that's one of the kind of literature that I've engaged with deeply, sports writing. I used to get Sports Star right from when I was in boarding school, and I would read it cover to cover. So yeah, I love sports writing. To read all kind of sport writing, and Karthik is fabulous.
Sarthak Dev, right?
Yeah. Then Sanobar is my friend from Augustsky. She writes really good personal essays. She writes, and yeah, I like that she can be uh, like she brutally honest. Can I say? Yeah, and that is that's a kind of a voice that we need. All of us need to uh, you know, hear that. So that is, I love, some of us writing. We've been writing together for last 2 years. Uh, so yeah, Sanobar Sabha. That's a second recommendation. Hmm. Well, Rajutai is one of the founders of Focus Guy. Uh, she co-facilitates along with Natasha, the Focus Guy workshops, and Rajutai is she's an inspiring creator because she is exploring so much on Substack that so many times I get to know these features are there on Substack because of her, because she keeps trying out be it video recording her essays, and how powerful it is to hear those words from the writer's word, in the writer's word. So that is something that I discovered while listening to her essays. And she writes poetry. She dabbles in making these, mm, making content for notes, right? What we have, which is for the timeline itself. So she has a JPEG image with the poetry and with an image. So she creates those especially for that, and she posts that. So she puts in a lot of effort, and she writes beautifully, of course, and she writes across a variety of topics. And then yeah, she also explores these ways of communicating. She's also done some spoken poetry as well, which is sort of really cool. So yeah, she's a creator to follow.
Right. Thank you so much, Karthik. And on that note, we come to an end of this episode of Learning Stories. I mean, I could speak to Karthik for hours and hours, and I feel like it would be as engaging a conversation as when we started. But to take this conversation forward, I would highly recommend looking up Karthik's writing on Substack. It's a beautiful, beautiful blog and writing space. It's called Reading This World. And I think what I've really enjoyed doing is not just reading his most recent piece, but actually going through so many pieces in his archive. And I think there are lots of gems, in his new pieces and his earlier pieces that um, I think you will get a lot of value from as a reader. It's also a great way to be introduced to this writing community on the internet called Substack. So, Karthik, thank you so much. I really appreciate you making time for this.
Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you for having me, and also thank you for building this platform. Because now, initially, when you invited me over, I thought, okay, why do I have to give this interview now? Because there's nothing to show. I haven't achieved anything. I've not got a book published. Or anything. But then I understand after going through your archive, and I realized, what this podcast is about. And yeah, by reflecting on my journey, if even one person, feels that if Karthik can do it, so can I, then I think we've done our job.
For sure. And you've inspired me as a writer, if anything else, Karthik. So, thank you again. And for the listeners tuning in, until next time, keep learning. Thank you.